now need glasses to read. Okay, so our speaker today has had a career like a coat of many colors. A native Californian, she graduated with a bachelor's degree from the University of the Americas in Mexico City. She received her first master's degree in education at University of Pacific, Stockton, California, and taught high school English and Spanish for 15 years. Married and raised 2 boys, she moved to Virginia and received her second master's degree in writing and editing. Oh, that's awesome. I'm a writer too. From George Mason University, Fairfax, Virginia. She moved to Kansas City, created the Foresight Institute in 1990, and offered the environmental leadership program to business leaders, teachers, and students. With her partner, Kelly Ellison, they also created Rainbow Generation for high school students with chapters in 45 high schools around Kansas City, offering them their own version of environmental leadership. Meanwhile, she wrote 4 books. In 2001, she decided to return to school and finish her PhD in environmental studies in 2009 at the age of 69. Yeah, that's awesome. A PhD is a research degree, she says, which entitles her to research anything she wants to, including today's talk, drawing from her lifelong experience in various well-meaning but misguided churches. Please help me welcome Twyla Dell.
I want you to know I'm overloaded with technology. I have this, I have the laser, I have this thing, and I may point something in the wrong direction at any time, be warned. So this is my coat of many colors. You heard that in the introduction. I was going to sprinkle an intro with references from the Bible like Virgin Mary and you know, I couldn't think of any. Methuselah, that's what came to mind. I want to thank you all for having me here today, and I love being at Kansas City Oasis. Sorry. And so many Sundays, and you may have done this as well, so many Sundays I have sat in churches and gone, and I finally found a place where I am happy. In fact, I haven't been this happy on a Sunday morning since I was 5 and Santa Claus came. And I feel like Santa Claus has come for me today. And I particularly want to thank my friends who are visiting around here, who have come especially for me today. I really appreciate, and all of the rest of you who are here today. I want to introduce my husband, Carl Longren, who is 90 years old. He was forced to walk up 2 flights of stairs to get here today because the elevator didn't work, and has lived to tell about it. And so if you want to know what a smart-ass 90-year-old is like, come up and talk to him afterwards. So our dog is 87. And so that makes me at least 10 years younger than that. So I'm the youngest in the family. So we're going to time travel today. And this is the point at which I'm going to point one of these things. Bear with me. Hey, I did it. We're going to be time travelers today. And we're going to go through several different worlds. I hope you'll stay with me, and we're going to examine, can you see my laser here? And you can see my laser here. Yes. And there's the screen. Okay. And we're going to take a look at time science, which is a way of measuring the passage of time using various instruments. So we're going to look at 6 different time science measurements today. All right, just hold still while I contemplate which thing to do next. Okay, the first one we're going to look at is GENE-ALOGY. And I have hyphenated the word because genes are the flow of life from one generation to another. If you've done anything on Ancestry.com, you know that this is what you do. you find the next relative, and the next relative, and the next. And so if you have a break in that line, then you don't have genealogy, you have history. So on this chart over here, this is genealogy. Here is the beginning of world history according to biblical record, 4004 BC. And I'm going to tell you today how we happen to get to that date, because it is an odd one. I'm going to put this whole young Earth theory together for you. It has a lot of moving parts. So we have Adam and Eve, who we're going to look at today, and we come around here to Noah. We have the great flood. The line is not interrupted. Shem comes down here. Here's Ham and Japheth. This is already too much biblical history. And we get all the way down here. If you draw a plumb line from 4004 BC down to here, you get to 0, which is what this chart says. There is no 0 century, by the way. There is 1 BC and 1 AD, but that's how it works. And you see the crucifixion here. And that is the end of the genealogy. But it is an unbroken line. It was very important for this line to exist, all the way down from Adam and Eve through all of the great figures of the Bible down to Jesus himself. This has great value in this meme that we're looking at here, using Daryl Ray's shirt from last week. And then the rest of this is history. This is absolutely the things that happened first century, second century, and so forth, all the way up to 2012. Here's Obama's second administration. This is a 2012 copyright. And the chart is circular because they believe in a circularity of life, circularity of things happening. And so here we're up to 2,000, a little over 2,000, and then we're going to go up to 3,000, then we're going to go up to 4,000, but then by God, it better be over. Right? So this is what the biblical genealogical map looks like. All right? These are related dead people, by the way. Related dead Jewish men, as a matter of fact. The second one is geology, to my left. This is an entirely different kind of chart, as you can see. Now, you and I might have started here and gone over to there, but for some reason they started down here and went up to here. This chart is supposedly about 4,000 years old. This chart is about 125 years old with the knowledge that each contains. So here we start, down here at the very bottom, as the earth formed, and this is called Hadean. That means hell. You know, it was a molten mass. The atmosphere was ammonia and methane. It was no place to live. And then you get into ancient nothing. And then you get into early nothing, middle nothing, and late nothing. And finally, you get into protozoas. And then you go up here, and you come down here, and you start up here. And all of these crazy names that are on here, by the way, are place names that have been Latinized to make them fit into the scientific jargon. So our favorite thing is Jurassic, right? We all know Jurassic Park, dinosaurs. No humans, dinosaurs. And so this comes from the Jura Mountains in Europe. Who knew? Where the Assic came from, I have no idea. The Triassic is 3 different kinds of rocks that were found in Germany. And over here you can see some Chinese names. Permian, where's Permian?
Right.
Right, all right, here. This is a basin in Texas, but it's actually named after some place in Greece. See, because the geologists who find these, and these are a stack of fossils, by the way, they get to name the place. And so we get all the way over up to here, and you are here. Down here, 4.5 billion years old. Over here, today. And this chart is still very much in flux. I talked to a professor of geology at KU last week, and he said in the last 15 years a lot of this has come together, even though the chart is about 100 years old. It is just always in flux, just like the earth itself. And if you want to come up afterwards, I put some stickers on here to tell you what's growing in each one of these areas. So up here is where we are. Right here is where humans began to break off and grow their own line of genealogy. This chart here fits into this little bitty spot right here. You see the difference? There's a comparison here of huge amounts of time. And this is what we're seeing today in the way of time science. Time is big. The third thing we're going to look at is dendrochronology, which is reading not tea leaves, but tree rings. The fourth one is ice core dating, in which you go out and get a core out of the ice and slice it up very thinly and take a look at what those slices tell you in the way of atmospheric conditions at that given time. 5, radiometric dating, and 6, measuring speed of light. We're going to look at all those this morning. So, some of those are going to go by faster than others. So I consider that you're all on my cosmic bus this morning. And here you are, there's the left side, here's the right side. So now I'm going to give you just a little direction. See if you can do this. Okay? I want you to raise an elbow. See if you can do this without asking which one. Raise an elbow, reach up, grab your seatbelt, bring it down to the opposite hip, fasten it. Y'all fasten in? Yeah. All right, now we're ready. We're on our way. I'm going to start with my own community moment because this leads me to where I am today and why we're looking at this. I grew up evangelical. How many of you did that? How many of you were in that circle? Who did that? Who said that? Yes, okay. So evangelical meant it was all church all the time, right? This was my week. Monday committee meetings, hated those, avoided those if I could. Tuesday Bible study, loved that. Great stories. I've always loved the stories of the Bible. Wednesday choir practice, loved that. I came from a musical family. And on Sunday mornings, my girlfriend and I, in choir robes, would walk up to the pulpit, lean, this was very sacred space, lean over the pulpit, get close to this big silver microphone that was about the size of a grapefruit, and we would sing. I was soprano, she was alto. All praise, all hail the power of Jesus' name. Let angels prostrate fall. I don't sing anymore. Break forth the royal diadem and crown him Lord of all. We were on the radio. This went out to several counties around. Of course, we didn't know what a diadem was. Nobody ever asked. We sure didn't have one. But this was what we sang every morning to open the service. Thursday prayer meeting. Oh my gosh, I went. Prayer can be a very lively thing. A prayer meeting can be wonderful. You just hammer at God. You weep at God. You beseech. You graciously accept. You thank. It is full of a range of emotions. And it was a lot of fun. I love it. I never missed it. In fact, I still go to prayer meeting every week, only we call it meditation and spiritual discussion. So that's been a lifelong habit. Friday night youth group. We were always supervised, we were always chaperoned, but we went to roller skating, game night, whatever, and every spring when the high schools had their proms, we would have a banquet instead, because we couldn't dance, right? And so we would dress up, the girls in formals, corsage, the boys in suits, and we would have a banquet in the church recreation hall, served by the ladies of the church. And of course we couldn't have sex standing up because they would think we were dancing. Saturday church project, tried to avoid. Sunday was the climax of the week. Sunday school, worship, and then a big family dinner, and finally back in the evening for a hymn sing, altar call, read rededication of your life for the following week. How many of you went through that? Something like that. Yeah. So we were busy, and it was all music all the time. I have to tell you about this one church. My grandmother was playing the piano. She was a superb pianist, and when the offering came, you did not pass the plate. Each row got up and came up to the altar one by one and put their offering into the plate, 10% so everybody could see you. And I was always given a nickel. This was back in the day when you could respect a nickel. You could buy a pack of gum. You could activate the telephone. So, and my grandmother's playing, "Onward, Christian soldiers." And if you have ever been to an evangelical church where they play the hymns on the piano, it is magnificent. And she would bang, 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 bang. She could scare the devil into the next county with that. And so I'm up there, "Onward, Christian soldiers." Put my nickel in, went back and sat down. It was the high point of the service. So what I'm saying is, we lived in this constant state of anticipation. Christ was coming any moment. Twinkling of an eye, right? And somebody last week called this the rapture culture. And I hadn't heard that phrase, but of course I knew it instantly because that's what it was. Anticipation. Expectation. Vigilance against sin. I want you to know there was no sin on my plate. I didn't have much to offer in the way of sin, but I didn't wear makeup. I didn't wear earrings. I knew girls who wore pierced ears, and they were going to hell. That was good. And so I was getting out of that. And so it was just that constant. I mean, Jesus could come back at any moment, and what if I were putting on mascara? Whoa, it was me. Oh, I have no memories. I have to put my cues up on screen. So, can you tell that's a toilet?
Yes.
Okay. So one time I'm over at the pastor's house. His name was Leroy. And I had to use the bathroom. And I'm on the toilet, and I look across at the wall, and here's a plaque that says, "Christ is coming." And I'm thinking, wait a minute, I'm talking to the pastor. Of course it was a joke, even for them. But it was nevertheless a very clear joke. Ha ha ha. Well, when I was 14, I was saved. I gave my heart to Christ. My name was written in the great book of heaven. And in response to that, I was given a Schofield Bible. It's probably the first Sunday morning that a Bible has appeared here. Am I right?
Yeah.
Yeah. This is that Bible. And even though we're enjoying ourselves, this is a fabulous book. It's probably the most important thing that's ever been a piece of literature on planet Earth in human time. There's just no doubt about it. And this is a Schofield Bible, which I will tell you more about shortly. And I lusted for it because every soldier, every God-given soldier in that church had one. And on Sunday mornings, I would notice when the sun hit that gilt, gold on the pages. And then when we would sit in church and Leroy would tell us to open the Bible, we'd get that little flutter of onion skin all the way across the congregation. It was like angels flapping their wings. And I lusted for one of these. I wanted to be a chainsaw for Jesus. And so I opened the book like everyone does. I'm coming to the point of why we're here today. You wondered when it was coming. So, first book of Genesis, first verse, page 1. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. A succinct and gorgeous piece of poetry. Not a thing wrong with it. Next to it, in the middle channel, it says B.C. 4004. Aha. Now, and one of my hands that knows what it's doing is going to point over here to 4004 B.C. So the question today is, how did we get to 4000 B.C. and 4? And how did that get into this Bible here? And how... This is beyond me.
Technical assistance. It's the Bible.
It's the Bible.
It just got to be opened up.
And in the line above it, it says, the events recorded in Genesis cover a period of 2,315 years. I didn't know that. Did you? And in parentheses, it says, Ussher. I had no idea what Ussher meant, or if that was a person, anything about him. But Ussher is entirely on every page of this book and has a great deal to do with this entire cycle of life and its dates. And the other thing I loved about the Bible was the Moroccan leather. And this is a beautiful package. It's the most gorgeous thing I ever owned at that age. And I knew some cow in Morocco had died for this. And I was sorry. I'm still sorry. And I'm going to pass this around because I want you to feel it. This is a substantial work. It is thick and glorious. And I want you to open it to the first page. Be gentle with it, because it says right here, I was saved, and then it says on page 1, I want you to look where it says 4004 BC, so that you appreciate those who believe this and why they think it is scripturally true. And I don't think I can get you to understand and appreciate that so much until you actually hold it. Can you pass it around for me?
Sure.
And the last person, bring it back.
Will it burn?
If you touch it, Daniel, oh my God, Daniel, Meshach, Shadrach, Abednego.
Oh, yeah. Oh, my goodness.
You guys been to Sunday school? You know Meshach, Shadrach, Abednego. One of the 3 young men who went into the fiery furnace in the book of Daniel. All right. Okay, we have James Ussher here. Now, time travelers, you with me? We have gotten into the 16th century. This is the Ussher that's mentioned on this page. So James Ussher was the Bishop of Ireland in the 16th century, a churchman who is responsible for this entire situation here. This is what he did. He gave the kind of solidity to the Bible that wasn't there. He was born in 1582, about 50 years after the Protestant Revolution had started. In fact, we can say that in England, it started in 1534 when Henry VIII separated the church from the Catholic Church and made the Church of England. And so he had once been Catholic. His whole family had been Catholic. But in those days, you believed what the king believed, and you immediately switched to Protestant. You broke ties with the Catholic Church in Rome, and you became a member of the Church of England. And it went back and forth several times. I don't have time for that history. But the big question that dominated Ussher's circle, because he was ecclesiastical, he was a churchman, was how old is the earth? What is the age of the earth? And why is that important? Now, some of you, as you hold that Bible, you're going to tell me. You're going to figure it out at some point. Why was that so important suddenly? I'll wait for you. It had been a long conversation. Look at these cultures who had tried to figure out this question. This was nothing new, but they had no way of measuring the age of the earth. And it got to be more and more important as the Protestant Revolution went on. So you can see they all were in the same neighborhood, weren't they? They all kind of knew, but they didn't have the kind of scholarship that Ussher was going to bring to it. So look at Johann Kepler, Martin Luther, they all tried. They all tried. But nobody seemed to get it right, and I guess there were enough people who knew it wasn't right, because how would you know that it wasn't officially accepted? So Ussher, like the others, counted the begats. You know what a begat is? It's a generation. It means, and this is all male history, by the way, ladies, the father begat. He sired a son. He fathered a son. Adam lived 130 years, begat a son in his own likeness, after his image, and called his name Seth. And the days of Adam after he had begotten Seth were 800 years, and he begat sons and daughters. And all the days that Adam lived were 930 years, and he died. Well, heck, that would be easy to count that up, wouldn't it? I mean, it's right there in the scripture. You count them all over, you have the age of the earth. And that's what many of these people did. But not all of the begats had ages. Oh, and if they didn't have ages, then you had to go scattering around and find other sources. So Ussher perfected the genealogical method. He looked at over 10,000 documents. He was a very bright, multilingual, well-read individual, and he wasn't afraid to look at all kinds of documents to find the answers. He coordinated those with the biblical begats, and he tied them to known historical life. That's all we do now. But he did it well. And this is where time science comes in. He's our first time scientist. Ussher created time with people. He laid dead Jewish men head to toe for generations. He was the first most widely noted time scientist the world has ever produced, and probably still is the most widely circulated. Although 99% of the people who use his timeline don't know about him. This is his book written in Latin. All timeline, published in 1650. And this is the title. Annals of the Old Testament deduced, which means he gathered all this together and plucked the truth from it. The first origin of the world, Asiatic and Egyptian sources, and produced from the beginning of historical times up to the Maccabees, which is a book in the Catholic Bible. And look at how precise this is. I deduced the time from the creation until midnight. January 1 AD was 4,003 years, 70 days, 6 hours. How could he know that? But that's how precise he worked, how precisely. The final verdict, creation occurred in the autumn because the apple Eve ate was ripe. That's not exactly scholarship. That's where he deduced some things. It was the beginning of the Jewish New Year. It was autumnal equinox, and it was a Sunday. This is very important. And the evening before the 23rd of October, 4004 BC. Now this is very precise. This is creation. The night preceding Sunday, what do we call the night preceding Sunday?
Saturday.
Saturday night. Right?
Yeah.
This is what I deduced when You're with me on this? So I think Saturday night had the same reputation in Ussher's era as it does now. That's why he did not want to say Saturday night. Who does their best work on Saturday night?
I do.
Now this will really put you in the know. Why 4004 BC? Because King Herod died in 4 BC. If you've been to Sunday school, if you remember the Christmas story, the wise men came to King Herod and said, we want to worship the newborn king. Where is he? And King Herod says, hey, wait a minute, I'm the king. And after he sent the wise men on their way, he sent his soldiers out and had all of the boys under 2 years old murdered. And so he died in 4004, he died in 4 BC, so Jesus could not have been born after the date of the death of King Herod. So that is an anchor for his beginning, 4004. So in the Bible, as you look at it, it doesn't say about 4000 BC. It says 4004 BC on a Saturday night, which it isn't going to admit to. And then also we have the idea about the day being 6,000 years, and that's why the earth is going to crash in 6,000 years from this beginning date. This is all of the young earth creation theory that I'm showing you here. Earth's potential duration was 6,000 years, commonly held belief, even today, corresponded to the 6 days of creation. And my grandmother, my mother, and I, when we read this, and we'd say, how long is a day? Well, it's a long day. I remember we'd all long day. Nobody knew how long it was at that point, ancient history. 1 day is with the Lord is 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is a day. And they use that to prove scripturally that this has to be true. But as a matter of fact, it comes from 2 Peter, written by the Apostle Peter, who was busy bringing a little church organization into line and making sure they were ready for the return of Christ, because they thought he was coming any minute. And it's about that. It's about being ready for the twinkling of an eye return. It is not about the creation. So the creationists have borrowed that 6,000 years from the New Testament, and it really has no bearing on the story. Okay, here we are. I already gave you away all this stuff. Did you know that Adam and Eve were never children? Did you think about that? They were born about the age of 30, according to the best records. They had no childhood. They had no parents to look after them. Where was God? I mean, think about the creation. Now, he's worked all week. You know, the stars, the moon, the ocean, the orchards, that apple, and it's Saturday night, and oh my God, we still haven't done those. People grab some clay and pats it together and sets them up, and he's out of there. You know, Saturday night's over. So, here are Adam and Eve. They're on their own. They had no parental models, and they started life by disobeying. Isn't that the first thing that Eve did? First thing. Why? She was an emotional 2-year-old. She had no upbringing. She had no training. She had no parental guidance. So, first thing somebody says, don't touch that apple. Well, you know what a 2-year-old does. No, don't touch the apple. No, don't touch the apple. You have to kill them to stop them, right? Haven't you done that? Yeah, well, this was Eve.
You can't blame it on our parents.
No wonder Cain killed Abel. Bad parenting. Here's the lesson. Never do your best work on a Saturday night. All right, here we are. No Abel. I already blew this, okay? Because they had no human birth experience. I mean, what the heck? How did... Well, we can't go into that. Here are no belly buttons. Doesn't that look weird?
Yes.
Sorry, I'm in your way. Or with belly buttons. The Renaissance artists could not decide. Some who were very biblical did without, and some who were more Renaissance did with. If God had created Adam and Eve first and set them on a cloud for a week while they watched everything else being made, how different the world would be today. Don't you think? They would have learned a few things about the order of things. So, time travelers, moving along. We're going to leave 4004 behind. Is that working? There it is. We're going to leave 4004 behind, and we're going to the 15th century. The most important weapon the world has ever seen was created in the 14th century. Anybody have an idea?
Printing press.
Who said what?
Printing press.
Oh, David, no kidding?
Okay.
That was my line. Thanks. Yeah, the printing press, 1450. They immediately began creating pages. Well, yes. But they immediately began creating print. And before then, you could live your entire life and never see anything in print because there was none. And you couldn't read anyway because there was no reason to. But with the advent of printing, it took about 25 years before they started putting out books, and particularly Bibles. Here's the 1450 Gutenberg press. And these were very easy to make, and so they started making them and putting them out. And the church had been the one source of information. It's very much like the Soviet Union. It may sound familiar. The one dispenser of rules, the one that created all and controlled all. And so with the information coming out and the spark of the church asking for donations constantly, they weren't donations, they were indulgences or fees. You had to pay to get born and to be blessed. You had to pay to get married. You had to pay to get buried in the churchyard. All of which you had to do or you were going to hell. But you also had to pay for it.
That hasn't changed.
Probably not. By charging fees like that, and the priests were the ones who contributed or who gathered them up, they built St. Peter's Cathedral. It took 120 years, and it's gorgeous. How many of you have been there? Yes, it is a fabulous, voluptuous, gorgeous building. That's built with poor man's tithes, poor man's pennies. People protested big time. And what do we call people who protest?
Criminals.
Protestants. Protestants or Protestants. And so this was the beginning of the Protestant Revolution. They just decided, hey, we're not going to do this anymore. And they began to create their own sects, their own denominations. And by the end of the 16th century, they were proliferating big time. Martin Luther came along, and he was early in the century, biggest media mogul of the Protestant Revolution. He printed his 95 Theses, put them on the church door in Wittenberg, Germany. And he was, as you can see, one very pissed off Jose because it took 97 reasons why the church was wrong. It wasn't just paying fees, it was just many, many things. He was a good Catholic priest. And he printed tracts that went all over the country and became a big user of the press. By 1530, over 10,000 publications were circulating, millions of copies, and the Protestant Reformation was a media revolution. You think we've had a media revolution? You have no idea what it's like to suddenly have something available in print to read or have someone read to you independently of receiving that information from the church. So it was huge, from one source to many sources. The rage of faith. That these people were cruel to each other. There was no sense of humor in splitting off. England persecuted the Catholics, the French persecuted the Protestants. You could be burned at the stake for praying in Latin in one country and praying in English in the other. They were hugely, hugely cruel to each other.
That hasn't changed.
What?
That hasn't changed.
Germany lost 40% of its population by the end of the 30 Years' War. France persecuted the Huguenots, which were a Protestant sect, they still exist, killed up to 100,000 of them. And I mean, in terrible deaths, terrible, burning, and I can't go into it. Some 618,000 Catholics died in Ireland. And this was Cromwell's work. He was the head honcho in England at the time. And they would round up the Protestants, drive them into the river. If they didn't drown, they'd stand on a bench and shoot them. Catholic. Couldn't be there. So here's the big deal. Here's a big shift from the church to the Bible. Who has the Bible at this point? Oh, okay. So, the Bible, because the church had lost authority, the Bible became the authority. When once there had been only one Bible in a church and the priest read it. Now people had Bibles. And this is where the evangelical movement began. This is where the Protestant sects and denominations began, because they could read the Bible, pick out various verses that appeal to them and say, okay, we're going to be the church that doesn't play music. We're going to be the church that meets on Saturday. You know, and then this is how it proliferated, because they had the Bible. Okay, why was this a big question? You haven't answered me yet. Because everyone now had a Bible, and they all said the same thing. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth, but nobody knew when. And because they all had Bibles and nobody knew when, they wanted to know when. Isn't that kind of important? And so this is where Ussher did his work. It answered the question, when did life begin on this planet? A later publisher, after Ussher died, put his timeline into the Bible, King James Bible. And then it was adopted by the Church of England in 1701. I mean, this is an author's delight, honey. You're looking for fame, baby, this is the way to get it. You get your work published virtually everywhere in the country. What these events gave Ussher had the greatest circulation ever. He was added to the Schofield Bible in 1909 at the height of the evangelical movement in America. And over the centuries, Ussher has become the rock star of biblical dating. And his work is referred to, remember, 4004 b.c.e, Saturday night. It's not all that good. But most of the people who believe that don't know the story. What Ussher gave us, concreteness. We finally nailed down when the whole thing started. Because we don't know when it ends, right? Because Revelation never tells us. Context using other historical documents. Amplification, it's a huge study guide, very detailed. And prestige. I mean, you have a Schofield Bible, you're something. So, that's how the earth got to be 6,000 years old. Got the whole thing now? Saturday night. Best scholarship came at the time when the power of the press began. The two things came together. It was irresistible for them to find each other. The day's interpretation comes from the New Testament that was written in 60 to 75 AD. It has nothing to do with the beginning. It has been lifted and used. And Ussher's timeline was included in the King James Bible, which has been very popular. The genealogy we have already done. This is it. Now we're going to go to geology. And why do we have to go to geology? Because by the time the Protestant Revolution was over, and all the wars they had fought, and all the trees they had cut to build all the ships they had built, Europe was pretty barren of trees, and they needed to dig for fuel. And so they started digging it. So that, as much as anything, began to get people to doubt this as truth. Mining meant money, and it began to churn for coal. And wood, since time began, had been the fuel, but now it was being replaced. So in 1669, the first inkling of geology, I mean, if you're not going to count your bodies, then you have to look outside yourself, and that's dirt, that's rock. And so you begin to look at geology, and so sedimentary rocks are laid out in a horizontal manner. This was the first observation. You and I look at that and say, yeah, but this was an absolutely spectacular discovery in that day. Younger rocks were laid over older rocks. I mean, this is the first time they'd ever really thought about those cliffs that they had looked at. The more miners dug, the deeper they got, the more they realized this is a much longer story than this story here. So geology became a science in the 18th and 19th centuries, very new. As I said, the professor told me this chart in the last 15 years has really changed and gelled and matured. And I'm sure it's going to do more. They take out names, they add names, they change times. By the 1840s, they estimated the Earth might be 1 million years old. See how new this is? Because we've been in this place all that time. By the 20th century, it was at 2 billion years old. It wasn't until the 1990s, we were all alive then, right? That they decided that the Earth was 4.5 billion and the universe was 13.7 billion. This is new. Okay, I told you that. Here's the geological column. Now, people had been looking at these things since time began, and they never had any curiosity about what that might mean because they lived in this. But now, I don't know how well you can see that, this is all seashells. This is all sand, and this is all sediment, and they begin to look at that, and then the naturalists, the men who went out and found these fossils, each one of these has a fossil layer. They began to put them in order. There's a place in Argentina. You know, you look at that cliff for thousands of years, and then suddenly you think, oh my gosh, the sedimentary level, you know, you begin to suddenly put it all together. Here's another one. Can you see that? The mountain is turned like this. It's been folded over on itself through pressure activity, maybe some volcanic work. Here's another one. There's a little layer here and a little layer here, and they're going to find some fossils in that, and they'll be able to date it. Here's another one. This is in England. This is a rainbow formation. Here's the Grand Canyon. There's no better example of stratigraphy than the Grand Canyon. Stratigraphy meaning writing in the rocks. And I don't know if you can see this. This is several layers. And down here's a penny, so it shows that this is also very minute. And so what in this world, we're laying dead men like this. In this world, we're laying different kinds of rock together with fossils at every level. Or if there are no fossils, then they have to find out what happened because life quit. And those are called extinctions. And if you come up afterwards, I have 5 extinctions on here. Where the rock layer, certainly there were no witnesses left, the rock layer tells them life went extinct here. There's nothing in these layers. And then they keep going and going and going. Oh, we've recovered. And now we're going to have dinosaurs, and then we're going to get this extinction. And so this is what geologists have been doing for 200 years, is figuring out this rock history. Okay, dendrochronology. This is one of those trees that you've probably seen in a state park, a national park, where they have the history of the world on that tree. Crusades. So here are the Pilgrims, Crusades, a very English-oriented timeline. And now they don't have to cut down the tree. They can bore into the tree with this very simple mechanism, bring out a core about the size of a pencil, and then they can look at it under the microscope and look at the tree rings and see when it rained, when it was dry, what kind of atmosphere was going on. And the length of these cores can be overlaid so that this much is the same in 2 different trees, and then this much is the same in 2 different trees. And they've been able to work up about 12,000 years in dendrochronology, is about as much as you can go. But nevertheless, that's longer than 6,000 years. What the smartly dressed dendrochronologist might wear. If you wear this shirt, people will know what you do. Or this, I love this. Okay, let's look at ice is nice. Now we're going to go to the icy part of the world. This is a Greenland camp, but you can go Greenland, Arctic, and Antarctic, where the ice is deep enough, maybe 300 feet, to get a core. And so here is the core mechanism. It's not complicated. And this is a piece of the core in the laboratory. Can you see that? And they look at it under the microscope, and it looks just like that. Does that remind you of something?
Tree ring.
It looks like the tree ring, doesn't it? So we're stacking things. People, rocks, trees. You get the idea, it's all kind of the sameness to it. And can you see that? 740,000-year-old piece of ice. So from the poles, we have found, time travelers, that you can travel this much on the ice core. Isn't that amazing? Okay. Radiometric dating. I'm going to read this to you because we can't get into explaining it. Using the known rate of change in radioactive elements, like the half-life, scientists can tell the age of rocks on the Earth date as far back as the oldest solar rocks, which are older than the ones that you find on the planet, at 4.5 billion years old. All right, number 6, light is right. Our neighboring galaxy, the Andromeda Galaxy, is 2.3 million light years away. Now we're getting into deep time, right? The light that comes to us is 2.3 million years old. We don't see the Andromeda Galaxy as it is when that light arrives, but as it was when it left the Andromeda Galaxy. It's kind of like the Voyager that was launched in 1977 to look into space and explore. So Jimmy Carter was president then, and there is a recording of him. Greetings to anyone who finds this in deep space. Hey, you all. And there's a copy of the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, the Magna Carta, and all those things that have made us who we are. And suppose that Voyager 2, which is now Earth from 4 billion miles away. This is a picture of the Earth right here. You can't tell on the screen where it was photographed 4 billion years ago, or 4 billion miles away, I should say. And so somebody in the Andromeda Galaxy gets our little Voyager and opens it up, and here's Jimmy Carter talking, and they have all of our stuff, and here's the 77 music. Well, the Andromeda folks think that that's us, right? Well, we're not that anymore. And yet, they don't know who we are whenever this happens. They know who we were. This is the way the speed of light works. So this is the beginning of the measurement of speed of light. And as early as 1862, it was nailed down. It really hasn't changed. So we know the speed of light, and we know a lot of mathematics and other ways to determine the age of the Earth. Yes? So this is a hello and farewell to everybody in the universe. And I would ask for questions, but they're too complicated to answer. And is it time science or is it belief? It is science if you count the time. Oh, that one. Okay. All right. Is it science if you count? It is science if you count the 13.7 billion years. It is belief if you count the shorter version. So let me finish up with, who is this guy?
That's Einstein.
Albert Einstein. He died in 1955. So is time an illusion or not? Okay. What's next? All right. Excuse me a moment. I have to set up what's next. What program I'm going to bring to you next is this. Why we are not descended from monkeys and how we know we aren't. That'll be next time, if you'll have me back. Ancestor or fellow traveler? Well, we need to answer this, don't we? I mean, we need to lay some of these old bugaboos to rest. And are we so different? Are we monkeys underneath?